Iron Resurrection wasn't built on staged drama or hired hands pretending to wrench for the camera. It ran on something rarer than that, which is actual craft, actual sourcing, and an actual Texas crew doing the real work in real time. 7 seasons on Velocity and MotorTrend, over 1 million viewers per premiere at its peak. A whole generation of backyard builders and working mechanics who point to this show as the reason they picked up a grinder for the first time. And that loyalty never faded when the cameras stopped rolling. Season 7 wrapped in March 2024, and what followed wasn't a cancellation so much as a quiet structural end, the kind that cable television produces when networks restructure faster than shows can adapt. No tearful finale. No formal goodbye episode. Just the last episode airing, and then silence, and then fans everywhere asking the same question: where did they all go? The answer runs deeper than most people expected, and it starts the way the show always started, with Joe Martin. Martin's origin story is the kind that lands hard because none of it was planned. Born in Illinois, raised in Austin, Texas, he spent his teenage years working at an automotive accessory store with no formal training and no roadmap, just an obsessive need to understand how machines worked and a talent for fabrication that kept growing every time he got his hands dirty. That self-taught foundation carried him all the way to Discovery Channel's Biker Build-Off in 2004, a competition that put him against custom builders from across the country, and when he walked away with $25,000 and first place, his reputation in the custom motorcycle and automobile world was cemented for good. Martin Bros Customs followed, built alongside his brother Jason, and then 12 years after the Biker Build-Off, Iron Resurrection premiered on Velocity and turned a Texas fabrication shop into a household name in car culture. What nobody fully appreciated during the show's run was the range of what Joe Martin could actually do. A 1967 Camaro pulled from a field, a 1950s Chevy truck brought back for under $15,000 in parts, vintage motorcycles with no business running. The fabrication was extraordinary, but the real skill was something harder to film, which was the ability to look at something completely destroyed and already see the finished machine inside it. And that skill did not stop when MotorTrend stopped calling. Martin Bros Customs remains open in Johnson City, Texas, still taking client builds, still turning out work that holds up against anything the show ever aired. The July 2025 announcement that the team had wrapped their time with MotorTrend TV came without drama or grievance, which is consistent with how Joe Martin has always handled things, quietly and on his own terms. What that independence unlocked was the Martin Bros Customs YouTube channel as the primary home for new builds, and anyone who's checked it recently knows the quality of the work hasn't dropped a single degree. If anything, without production schedules and network notes shaping what gets shown, the footage runs closer to what actually happens in that shop. Joe still avoids personal social media almost entirely, the way he always has, but the shop's Instagram account at close to 200,000 followers stays active and is where the work surfaces first. And that's where the most important post-show update lives, because since the show ended, Joe Martin has been building something that hasn't been formally announced. Based on what's visible through the shop's channels and through people close to Martin Bros Customs, this build carries none of the usual constraints. No client brief, no network deadline, no camera schedule dictating the pace. It's a machine being made the way Joe Martin made things long before anyone outside Austin, Texas knew his name, driven entirely by personal vision, and by most accounts it's getting close to being shown publicly. For an audience that followed 7 seasons of watching someone else's dream builds, seeing one built purely for the builder himself is worth paying attention to. Now for Amanda, because her story is one that the show consistently undersold. Before Iron Resurrection, before Martin Bros Customs, Amanda Martin ran branch operations at Wells Fargo and climbed to deposit operations vice president at Pioneer Bank, a career path that required exactly the kind of financial precision and operational control that made her indispensable to a fabrication business that needed someone who could actually keep the money from bleeding out mid-build. Walking away from banking to co-own a custom vehicle shop was a bigger leap than it looked from the outside, and then doing all of that on camera while people tried to reduce her to the token woman in the garage, she never let that framing stick. Amanda's role covered budget management, client relationships, sourcing logistics, and the unglamorous reality of keeping builds commercially viable when Joe's vision ran ahead of what the books could support. That Mustang build in Season 5 is the clearest example of what she actually brought to the operation, an $8,000 parts budget that looked unworkable until she found the path through it and pulled the whole project back from collapse. The tension that appeared on screen in an earlier season, where it looked like she might step back from the business entirely, reflected real weight rather than manufactured drama, the kind that comes from running a fabrication shop and a television production simultaneously while maintaining a marriage and raising a family. She decided to stay, and the post-show version of Amanda has expanded well beyond the cars. Animal rescue has become a visible and meaningful part of her public identity, with Martin Bros Customs tying fundraising directly to organizations including PayW's Shelter and Southern California Pit Bull Rescue. As of early 2026, she and Joe remain together, still running the shop out of Johnson City, Texas, and her personal social media presence, more active than Joe's has ever been, reflects someone who found a second calling worth showing up for. The rest of the crew each took a different road, and the range of where they ended up tells you something real about what kind of people the show was actually built around. Jason "Shag" Arrington was the engine of Iron Resurrection's sourcing operation, the one walking into Texas barns and convincing someone to part with a machine they'd held onto for 30 years. And the gift for that kind of negotiation isn't performance. It's a genuine human skill that either works in a room or it doesn't, and Shag's worked consistently. Post-show, he co-founded YourBikerGang.com, a company built around electric vehicles and group touring experiences. And the pivot makes sense when you understand that what Shag always cared about wasn't the metal specifically, but the culture built around riding and the community that forms around shared machines. He's still in Austin, still runs at full speed. Jason Martin, Joe's brother, known to viewers as Hollywood, served as both co-producer and fabricator throughout the show's run, which meant he was simultaneously making television and making cars, and those two jobs require completely different kinds of attention. He kept a lower profile than anyone else in the cast during the show's run, and that's continued since. Jason has remained connected to Martin Bros Customs and is part of what the shop is becoming in its independent chapter, quietly contributing the way he always did. Javier "Shorty" Ponce left the show during Season 4, and the departure came down to family, stated plainly and handled with respect on both sides. He's been running his own custom paint and fabrication work since then, staying close to the craft under his own name rather than anyone else's, which is exactly the kind of move that makes sense for a specialist who was always more interested in the quality of the work than the size of the audience watching it. Pompa exited the crew in 2020, before the later seasons aired, and has been freelancing in fabrication since. On May 30th, 2025, Joe Martin posted a throwback video of Pompa on social media to mark his birthday, and the warmth in that caption made clear that professional paths diverging didn't change the respect between them. Mike Z stepped away to focus on family and personal projects outside the television world, and that pattern repeats enough across this cast that it deserves to be said plainly. Building cars and building a reality television show at the same time is genuinely exhausting work, and most of the departures came from people making honest choices about where they wanted their hours to go, not from conflict or collapse. Now, the question that's been sitting in the fan community since March 2024, will Iron Resurrection come back? Here's what the actual record shows, separated from the speculation. MotorTrend never issued a formal cancellation statement for the show. What happened was structural. MotorTrend Plus as a subscription streaming service was sunset, and its content library, Iron Resurrection included, migrated to Max and Discovery Plus. The network's original programming strategy shifted with that migration, and separately, in July 2025, Martin Bros Customs publicly confirmed they had completed their relationship with MotorTrend TV and were now operating independently. All 7 seasons remain available through Max and Discovery Plus, with individual episode purchases available on Apple TV and Amazon, but new episodes through that cable and streaming partnership are finished. What Joe Martin has said publicly about the future stays carefully measured, ruling nothing out while making clear that any future content happens on his terms. The independence Martin Bros Customs built after the show isn't incidental, it's deliberate. They aren't waiting for a network to come back. They're building something that doesn't require one. Fan energy hasn't cooled in the time since. A Change.org petition passed 10,000 signatures. The hashtag #RenewIronResurrection generated over 5,000 posts in the first quarter of 2025 alone. A 2024 Hot Rod Magazine poll found that 40% of mechanics under 30 named the show as an influence on their career path, which means the audience didn't shrink when the show went off air. It kept growing on streaming as new viewers discovered it. A traditional network return looks unlikely in the short term, given that the MotorTrend partnership is closed and the streaming environment has fragmented in ways that complicate new cable deals significantly. Something independent, a direct YouTube series, a subscription model, a streaming deal built entirely around Martin Bros customs rather than a network brand, fits what the team has been building toward since they announced their independence. And that outcome looks not just possible but consistent with the direction everything is already moving. Iron Resurrection ended because cable television changed, because the economics of production shifted underneath a show that still had over 1 million viewers per premiere, because MotorTrend restructured its streaming ecosystem and the traditional TV model that had carried the show for 7 seasons stopped being the right container for it. That's the complicated part. The straightforward part is that the people who made the show worth watching never stopped being those people. Joe Martin is still in that shop in Johnson City, Texas. Amanda is still keeping the business viable and growing. Shag is still chasing the next thing with everything he has. The fabrication craft that Iron Resurrection was built on was never the property of a network. It belonged to the people doing it, and those people are still doing it, just without a cable deal telling them when the cameras roll. If Iron Resurrection shaped how you think about custom fabrication and car culture, subscribe, because every week this channel covers the real stories behind shows exactly like this one.